Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Visionary Women's Salon on Moral Leadership, How Next Gen is Challenging the Status Quo. For those of you who I don't know, I know a lot of you, I'm Laura Fox. I'm a board member at Visionary Women, and I'm also the chair of the Grants Committee. The Grants Committee is responsible for allocating all the money that comes in from memberships and sponsorships, and we use it to support a range of, excuse me, fantastic organizations that advance the status of women. I love doing this work because I get to see firsthand just the incredible impact that Visionary Women is having with our grant making. So at Visionary Women, our mission is to unite and inspire a community of visionary female leaders in support of causes that lift up women and girls. For those of you who are here on the Grants Committee, I see Tara, you know that since 2015, I'm proud to say we've been able to raise almost $2 million, which we have distributed to over 100 different organizations, which advance the status of women. So we started in 2015, we gave away, I think, $80,000, all the way up to 2019 when we were able to give away, sorry, I have something, we were able to give away $550,000 last year. So our giving has really grown since its inception. We're mostly centered on our giving in the Los Angeles area. So in the Los Angeles area, we focus on housing and homelessness, education, human rights, and the arts. So that means that we support a really wide range of organizations from the Downtown Women's Center, which provides programs for women experiencing homelessness, to Step Up to create pathways to college for girls from under-resourced communities, to one of our favorites, which is a very small organization program called Camp Suzanne, which reunites incarcerated mothers with their children. A small percentage of our giving is focused on developing countries because we know our dollars have a really big impact in developing countries. So we have given for a few years to an organization that provides vocational training for female refugees in Rwanda. We partnered with Human Rights Watch, an educational program for girls in Pakistan, where we know, for example, that only about 13% of girls are actually still in school by the 9th grade. So that's our giving generally. Last summer, fortunately, we were able to give $100,000 to 13 different organizations that were working sort of on different facets of COVID relief. So those grants range from everything from putting computers in the hands of kids that needed them to continue their remote learning, to addressing food insecurity, to a couple of grants to domestic violence organizations that were facing increased need following the implementation of the Safer at Home orders. So that's sort of our giving in a nutshell. All of these grants were made possible by the generosity of our members. So on behalf of the board, I really want to thank all of you who have been part of Visionary Women and been here with us from the beginning, or even if you joined us recently. We really want to thank you because it's because of you that we're able to do what we do at Visionary Women. So our salon today is part of our Impact series. I think hopefully a lot of you were able to join us for Jacqueline Novogratz, the founder of Acumen, and we had Asia Brown, the mayor of Compton. So what we're trying to do with this series is inspire other visionary leaders to figure out how they can create an impact in their own communities. So today we have two young leaders who are perfect examples of how you can create an impact. We're going to be moderated by Batool Hassan, who's the director of Acumen Academy, and we have Sabrina Habib and Steph Speirs, who are here to share with you their experiences in creating their fantastic social enterprises. So I'm going to turn it over to Batool, who's going to tell you a little more about our panelists and about the topic for the day.
Thanks, Lara. Thanks so much for having us. Really excited to be here. And thanks again to Visionary Women for hosting this and for starting this conversation together. So as Laura mentioned, my name is Batool Hassan. I work with Acumen Academy and I am a director within Acumen Academy, and I primarily focus on all of our expansion and community work. And Acumen Academy, just to give folks a little bit of background in case not as familiar, Acumen Academy is a world school for social change. Our mission is to unleash a new generation of social innovators and leaders with the character and competence to build a more just, inclusive, and sustainable world. We provide a blend of online and offline learning for anyone, anywhere. Our whole purpose is to create access to individuals around the world for access to better practical tools, resources, and supportive community as they try to address change and create change within their own communities. And what does that look like? We have 9 fellowship programs worldwide. We have 700 plus fellows. We have 39 online courses that have reached over 1 million signups since we started. And we also run social impact accelerators. We've done about 10 accelerators that have reached over 200 organizations and support them in their journey as they try to build sustainable social enterprises. Acumen Academy is a part of Acumen, and if you were able to participate in the last conversation with Jacqueline Novogratz, she's our founder. We've been around for 20 years. Acumen's mission is to change the way the world tackles poverty by investing in companies, leaders, and the spread of ideas. We invest patient capital in social businesses whose products and services reach low-income communities. And we've provided about 130 million in capital to over 100 social businesses since we started. And when I talk about Acumen Academy and our fellows, joining me today are Sabrina Habib, who is the co-founder of Kidogo, and Steph Speirs, who is the co-founder of Solstice Initiative. And I also want to give a shout out to my colleague, Alex Trabulsi, who is also on the call. And Alex will help after we have a conversation and a dialogue. It's meant to be really engaging, and it's most meaningful if we have more questions from the group, and feel free to start throwing in questions into the chat. And Alex, thank you for helping to make sure that we can manage the chat questions while I'm in conversation, and we don't want to miss a beat as we go. And I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina and to Steph to share a bit more just background and to share more about Kidogo and Solstice as part of the introduction, and then from there we'll jump into some questions. So with that, Sabrina, do you mind sharing a bit about your background and Kidogo?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina, and I'm just so honored to be able to speak to you all today. By way of introduction, I'm the co-founder and chief exploration officer at Kidogo, and we are the largest network of quality, affordable childcare in Kenya. We use a social franchising model, so we work and partner with low-income women and give them the tools and the knowledge and the skills to be able to start or grow their own childcare micro businesses. We've been doubling our reach every year since 2017. We currently have a network of 150 centers serving over 4,000 children as ages 0 to 3 years. And these are 4,000 children that we see 10 hours of the day, 6 days a week for their first 3 to 4 years of life. And it's all part of our theory of change, which is if 90% of brain development takes place in those first few years of life, then by investing in these early years, we're able to raise a generation of competent, creative children with great critical thinking skills who will ultimately be able to break their own intergenerational cycles of poverty, but also go on to change their own communities and countries. And so it's work that we love doing, and really excited to be able to share more about this with you today.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. And I know we're gonna jump into more around Kidogo and your work in a little bit. But before we do that, Steph, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and Solstice?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Steph Speirs. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Solstice. I'm going to ask you to use the reaction button right now because I'm going to ask a question of everyone, which is put a thumbs up reaction in your screen if you have looked into solar or you have solar for your home. If you could do me that favor and click thumbs up if you have looked into it or have it. Okay, so the problem that Solstice is trying to solve, thank you everyone for doing that, take a look around. It's not everyone, but that doesn't mean everyone doesn't want solar, because the problem in America is that 4 out of 5 Americans cannot actually put solar on their own home. It's for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're a renter or a condo owner. Maybe there's a tree covering their roof, or the roof is facing the wrong way, or it's made out of the wrong materials, or it's flat. Or maybe they cannot afford solar because it costs $10,000 to $40,000 to put on your home, or they don't have the right FICO credit score to get financing. So congratulations to everyone who has put solar on your home. You are a beautiful unicorn. But for everyone else, Solstice offers something called community solar. And that means that rather than put solar on your home, you're buying a portion of a neighborhood shared solar farm. And what makes it really accessible is that there's no upfront cost. You don't put anything on your home, and you're actually guaranteed savings compared to what you pay your utility. So it is the most affordable and accessible type of solar out there. We don't actually build the projects. We build some projects for low-income communities, but mostly we're a software and services company. We handle every step of the community solar experience for projects across the country, and we've worked on 25 projects.
So Steph, while I have you on this, we're going to kind of jump straight into going back and forth into questions. Can you share a little bit, what put you down this path to the work that you do? What's your personal story and how'd you start?
Yeah, so I'm from Hawaii. Despite the Boston mug you see in the background here, I was born and raised in Hawaii. I am the daughter of a single mother, and I think mothers already are kind of the most amazing people in the world, and then single mothers have an extra challenge on top of that, because I watched my mom raise 3 kids on a minimum wage salary. And you know, everyone knows it's really hard to make it in this country on a minimum wage salary. Sometimes you have to choose between paying the rent or paying your electricity bill or paying your cell phone bills. And I watched my mom my whole life struggle to make those choices. And I didn't start out doing renewable energy. My first job out of college was to work on the first Obama campaign, back when we didn't actually ourselves think he would win. We just wanted to help him. And so that started a 5-year journey of working in government on the Middle East and national security and counterterrorism. And it wasn't until I was working in Yemen on the Middle East for the White House when I realized that I wasn't helping ordinary people get the power they needed to power their daily lives. We would be in these armored vehicles in Yemen, just working on counterterrorism, but you looked out the window and people were just lined up waiting for fuel. They couldn't get enough fuel to power their homes and their families and their businesses and their schools. And so that's when I left government and went to go learn more about renewables, first with Acumen. Acumen let me have an unpaid internship when I was 30 years old. I'm very, very thankful for that. I got to learn about energy in Pakistan and then went to India to work for one of their portfolio companies and then came back to the US to start Solstice.
Thanks, Steph. Really appreciate that. And Sabrina, same for you. What put you down this path? What's your personal story?
I can say that I quite literally stumbled into the work that I'm doing right now. I was working in Kenya with a large nonprofit after university, and in a community meeting, I had heard the word baby care. And I was, again, this young, naive, early 20-year-old and raised my hand and said, "What's a baby care?" And the community members said, "You don't know what it is? I'll show you." And so we walked through the winding alleyways of this informal settlement. We got to this unmarked property. We took our shoes off at the gate and we opened the door. And I remember the smell of urine, of feces. There was no sanitation at all. And it was completely dark. I couldn't see anything. I'd come from this bright sunlight outside. And so I started to inch my way forward, trying to understand what this baby care was all about. And my foot hit something. And I looked down and it was a little baby. And I instinctively leaned forward to pick her up. And I saw babies all around me, 15, 20, maybe more, all awake, but completely silent. These kids had learned not to cry anymore because they didn't receive any attention for it. Or in some cases, they were actually given alcohol or Pirital, a sleeping pill, to keep them hushed through the day. And I asked a lot of questions to the woman that was running this baby care. And I learned that this was the best childcare option for working moms living in the informal settlements. It was either this or leaving their child home alone, tied to furniture as they ran out to wash clothes door to door or sell fruits and vegetables. Or they would pull an older sibling, usually a girl, out of school to look after this younger sibling. And the craziest part about all of this was that parents paid up to $1 a day to have their child supervised while they went to work. And when I reflect back on that experience, it wasn't as much about the daycare, but it was about what the daycare represented. On the one side, I was seeing this struggle and this injustice and this lack of opportunity. And on the other side, I was looking at myself and my own privilege. And even though my parents are born in East Africa, my grandparents, my great-grandparents all come from the region, I was privileged to be born in Canada. And just simply out of sheer luck of where I was born, the trajectory of my life has looked very different. I've had great education, great healthcare, great opportunities. And I've always felt like I've won this genetic lottery. And this experience of nearly stepping on a child really put me face to face with that uncomfortable reality. And I think that was my moment of obligation, that I needed to do something. And I left that experience. I called a friend at the time who became my husband and my co-founder, and told him what I saw. Was in tears, was angry, was frustrated that this existed and no one was doing anything about it. And we ended that conversation with one single question, which is, how might we provide a higher quality childcare option at roughly the same price point that moms were already paying, about $1 per day?
Sabrina, that's incredible. Thanks for sharing that. And I know that it was a long journey to get there, and you and Afzal both together kind of worked through different learning experiences, even within Acumen, and taking Acumen courses to kind of get started to understand, like, what does it take to build these businesses. And as I listen to you, I can't help but think that you serve a very unique community. It's not just babies and infants, but it's their mothers, and it's the working mothers who need access to childcare itself. And I'm interested to know, in your experience of building Kidogo and seeing them as the end individuals that you serve, what's something that you've learned along the way about low-income working mothers, and about trying to set up these these micro businesses with the mompreneurs?
Yeah, so I'm not a mother. I hope to be one soon. But I think there is this universal truth, which is every mother, no matter where you are in the world, you want the best for your child. I think that that's a given. But because of people's circumstances, it can be difficult. You have to, the communities we work with, mothers have to make a very, very difficult decision of, do I go to work and put food on the table, or do I stay at home with my infant child? And so I think there are some of these universal truths that I've learned over the last few years of doing this work. But I think what's more interesting is the initial leap of doing this work was interesting because although this problem was so pressing, and although it was so clear to me that something needed to be done, I didn't feel like the right person to do the work. I think I had not come from the community. I was not born in Kenya. I didn't feel like this was my place or right to do anything. I had seen way too many well-intentioned foreigners come in, helicopter in with ideas, and want to save the day. And I was so certain that I didn't want to be that for 2 years after this incident, I continued my journey of my own work, and my husband did as well. And on the side, we did a lot of research. We interviewed hundreds of mothers and daycare operators to understand their pain points and their desires and their struggles. We looked at a global benchmarking study to figure out how other organizations were dealing with the childcare crisis, because if it was an issue in the slums of Kenya, it had to be an issue in the slums of India or Latin America. And once we compiled all of this together, we took it back to the nonprofit that I worked at and said, you've been operating in these communities for decades. You've got the trust. You belong here. Here's a problem, and here's some ideas on how to solve it. And when their initial reaction was, it's not part of our strategic plan, Afzal and I looked at each other and said, I guess it has to be us. And I think it was an interesting moment that we realized that if we want change, we can't look around for others to do it. We have to do it ourselves. And that's when we gained the courage, we left our jobs and moved to Nairobi and started Kidogo.
I appreciate you sharing that, because it highlights something that I feel like I've heard both you and Steph say in the past, that as you stumbled across the problems, you're both unique in your archetypes, in that you are builders. You see a problem, but you also approach it with humility, that, others are doing this work, others have, tried and tested solutions. Others may have more expertise and experience. And so you try to work within different approaches. And at some point, because you're undeterred and you see that it's not being solved, you take it on yourselves. And Steph, I think I've heard you say something similar, that even in your experience of starting up with Solstice, you started to identify what are the solutions that are out there and what are the opportunities or the stakeholders that are involved. And I'd be curious to hear your experience just starting that part up, and then how you switched into, all right, it's got to be me.
I think Batool is referencing the fact that I never wanted to be an entrepreneur ever, because my dad was a failed entrepreneur. And part of the reason why we lived on food stamps was because his business went out of shut down. But I realized that, you know, entrepreneurship is not about starting your own thing. Like Batool said, it's about seeing there's a gap in the world and thinking maybe you can contribute to helping solve that gap, or at least bridge the gap. And so when we thought about, okay, we know clean energy is going to be booming because it's an industry that's making a lot of wealth for people. It's very lucrative. We know it's going to be booming, but is it going to be equitable? And the fact of the matter is the energy system is not very equitable right now. You look at all of the studies about climate change, low to moderate income Americans, which are disproportionately Black and brown, they're the most affected by climate change. Okay, what does that mean? Well, they have a higher energy burden, so they pay a higher amount of their salary on energy than wealthier communities. They live closer to fossil fuel facilities, which is related to the fact that they suffer from more air pollution and asthma, which is related to higher rates of COVID morbidity as well. And also their neighborhoods are quantifiably hotter. Like low to moderate income neighborhoods are hotter because they lack green space and they flood more often. And there's just worse natural disaster effects in those areas. So you take all of that, right? Low to moderate income Americans, Black and brown Americans are disproportionately affected by climate change. And yet they're also disproportionately locked out of all the benefits of the clean energy economy. So the people that need savings the most for their lives to survive, the people who need solar savings the most, are currently the least likely to get it in this country. And I think it's really hard to talk about climate change mitigation without talking about climate justice, that we have a moral responsibility to try to make sure the benefits of this very lucrative industry go to the communities that are most hurt by climate change.
Thank you. I think there's so many different pieces of what you're saying in terms of equitable access, which is part of why I know that both of you do the work that you do. And I can't help but think that with all the deterrence you've probably faced as entrepreneurs in the markets where you work, that it requires a different type of grit and determination. And it reminds me of a line from the Acumen Manifesto. One of my favorite lines is, it requires patience and kindness, resilience and grit, a hard-edged hope. And I'm interested to know, when's a time that you've had to really pull out the hope, that hard-edged hope, to continue to do what you do, because it's been a long journey. And Sabrina, I wonder if you could start.
I think the words hard-edged hope are tattooed probably to Steph and my arms, because you have to have it every day in order to do this work, because it's challenging. I think a story that comes to my mind is years ago when we started our first center, our first Kidogo Center. We had 20 parents that initially enrolled, and we had such a vision of what the center would be like. I'm thinking about my own daycare that I went to, and infusing the best of Montessori and Reggio Emilia play-based approaches with the science of early childhood, and adapting it to the local context, which is, you know, the largest slum in Africa. And the more we talked to parents, the more we realized our biggest challenge was that parents didn't want their children to play. They were very clear. They wanted their children in desks and chairs, staring at a chalkboard, writing numeracy and letter work all throughout the day. They wanted the child to be sent home with homework every single night. and they wanted exams every month so that they could assess how their child was doing compared to other children. And let me remind you, these children are 2 years old. And so it felt so funny, and it felt like it would have been easy to either concede completely and say, okay, if this is what you want, the customer is always right, let's do this. And it would have been better than the alternative of the daycare that I had mentioned that I had first stumbled across. But it wouldn't have harnessed the creativity and the socio-emotional development and the critical thinking skills that we believe are so necessary to be successful in this world that we live in. And so instead we turn to this hard-edged hope and curiosity, which I think is so related, and had a conversation to really understand why these elements were important. And for example, we learned that parents wanted homework because they wanted their child to keep engaged so they didn't bother the mother when the mother was cooking in the evening. And so by understanding and by really listening, we're able to meet them halfway and actually design take-home activities that kept the child engaged and away from the mother and the kitchen area, but engaged in play and learning at the same time. And so I think it was a very long, enduring, patient process. But by bringing people along your journey, which I realize is so critical if we want to see the world that we imagine it to be, it was critical. And now our parents are our biggest champions. All of our centers are full, and we've never done any formal marketing before. Everything is through parent referral. And I often hear stories of parents bringing their neighbors or their friends to our centers, and they tell us straight out that this center is weird, it does strange things, but it works. And they cite their child being better than other children and more social and more independent. And we've done research to show that our children are in the top 5% of their class when they go into primary school. And so I think this is one example where that hard-edged hope and that patience and that curiosity was so vital to ensuring the success and growth of our organization.
Thanks, Sabrina. And I know as a mother, there's nothing quite like word of mouth to help endorse whether your child's going to be good, doing well in a school or a daycare environment. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's really important. Steph, same for you. Knowing the community that you work with and how much of a sometimes uphill battle it can be to convince. I can imagine that this is also a piece that's been important for you and that you exemplify.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to take a note and say that when I heard Sabrina at the top say we're now the largest, I think, caregiver network in Kenya, did I phrase that right? Somewhat accurately, Sabrina? My heart lifted, and because I hadn't heard that before. And I met Sabrina at a time when both of us were just getting maybe our first beneficiary clients or customers, when we were just starting out, and there's so many challenges and you don't know if you're going to survive beyond the next 6 months. And to have met her then and to see her be the biggest network in Kenya just is testament to her and Afzal's hard edge hope. And there have been a lot of moments like that for us too at Solstice. There was the moment where my co-founder in 2017 said, you know what, I don't think this is growing fast enough. I'm out. I recommend that you quit too, so that we can all move on with our lives. And there was a moment in which I considered that, because when you going down the road more, one co-founder down is a harder road to go down. Or there's the moment 2 years ago where we almost didn't make payroll. And my co-founder and I said, you know what, this is not something we ordinarily would do, but let's put our personal loans or actually borrow capital to infuse the company in with money to cover payroll till we could make more revenue and pay more, get more investors. But I think the hardest moment by far was April 1st, 2020, because 2020 has been a roller coaster for everyone. And in our industry, we call it the solar coaster. April 1st, 2020, we looked at our bank account and we realized in the prior 2 weeks that we had been operating kind of during the first days of closure of COVID, our revenues dropped 80%. And so much of what we do is about trust building in local communities, and so much about trust building happens in person. And suddenly we had no prospect of doing any of that in person. And we were gonna run out of money in a couple of months. And it was actually women that saved Solstice. Our women investors from Next Wave Impact and some other angel groups, they came in and they said, we support you. Your work is more important than ever. And we're going to put more capital in. And when they did, other people followed. And we just closed the most successful quarter we've ever had in the history of the whole organization in terms of number of people served, number of customers. And we just beat our best quarter previously by 4x. And so this is the power of a supportive network. And this is the power of the Hard Edge Hope, but you don't do it alone. So that's that reminder to find your people and build great networks with them has pushed us through those really hard times.
That's incredible. Congratulations, Steph. That's really incredible. This actually dovetails really well with the next question that I had. We were talking with this incredible community of visionary women who is a network of extraordinary women who are also builders and doers. And I can't help but think about women as community. I mean, you're both Acumen fellows. Steph, you've already talked about the role that women have played for you in all of this. And Steph, at a moment a few years back, you actually talked a lot about the importance of sanctuary and what sanctuary means for individuals, for women all over. Can you share a little bit about that? Can you define it? What does it mean? And the role that we all have to play in creating sanctuary. And I'm thinking about my past conversations with Nina too, that especially now in this moment of such divisive elections, what's the role, what's the importance of leaving our silos and communicating across ideological lines, and what role sanctuary and community plays in that?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have a diverse democracy, you need sanctuary because you need people to feel safe. You need for them to feel at home. You need them to feel like they have belonging and community, because sanctuary is where we build power. It's where we help each other and we build a coalition and we build a bigger tent. But I think what I learned about this work of social change is that there's a danger of sanctuaries, because sanctuaries can become silos. And silos can become distortions of reality and fantasy worlds. And ultimately, no deep and abiding change has ever come from preaching to the choir. You generally have to get out of the safe bunker silo and go out and talk to people, frankly, sometimes whose views you find intolerable, and find ways to bridge the gap. I mean, my first job out of college, I'm very thankful, was walking around in rural communities in small towns across America and knocking on doors and asking people, what are you hoping to see in a better America? And it didn't matter if I was in a red area or a blue area. The answers were always the same. It's, I want to provide for my family. Like, I want my children and my grandchildren to be safe and thriving. I want to earn enough money to provide for my family. I want the dignity of having a job that isn't, something I'm ashamed of. I want to be good to my loved ones, and I want them to be good to me. These are the things that are common amongst all of us. And we can create policies that are grounded in that rather than fear. So sanctuaries are important, but if we want to make the world better, we need to get out of our sanctuaries too.
Yeah, well said, really well said, and apt in this moment. And Sabrina, taking it to you for a second, this idea of community and women in community. We were talking before that you're essentially running a company, an organization by yourself during a pandemic. What has the role of community meant for you in this time?
Yeah, I want to touch on something that Steph said, because I think it's so powerful, the idea of the risk of turning sanctuaries into silos and the importance of building bridges. And I know we're talking primarily about the US, but I'm based in Nairobi right now, and I'm looking around me, and there's a brink of a civil war in Ethiopia on one side. We had elections in Tanzania 3 weeks ago where there was evidence of voter fraud, election rigging, and voter intimidation. And so this is something that is so real to all of us, no matter where we are in the world. And I think it's worth saying that it is so important to leave our silos and to build bridges, but also that it is hard work. and it's exhausting. And unless you're a superwoman, and after knowing Steph for 5 years, I'm convinced that she actually might be one, but unless you are literally a superhero, I don't know if it's possible to do it every moment of the day because of the toll it takes on your emotional energy and your human spirit and your existence just as a person. And I think that's where, to your question, I think that's where I see community coming in. We all need those places where we can take off our armor, tend to our wounds, heal, and then suit up and go back to it again the next morning. And I found that this year, I've run an organization with a co-founder since it started. And earlier this year, right at the beginning of the pandemic, my husband transitioned out of the organization, and I found myself leading a company on my own in a period of uncertainty, with a lot of moral and ethical dilemmas. You know, what do you do when the communities you're serving are down to one meal a day? What do you do when you're hearing instances of child abuse and domestic violence because of the stress going on at home? What do you do when the government wants your support to develop childcare reopening guidelines, but will only do it if you pay their requisite daily allowance or their bribe? And I found that it was difficult. My family and friends didn't necessarily understand what was going on and were trying to be supportive, but just weren't there in the trenches with me, or were preoccupied with their own lives, understandably. And I found it was within these communities, the Acumen community, the Echo and Green community that Steph and I are both part of, that I turned to. And it's about that safe space that you can say, hey guys, like this work is hard and I'm not sure what to do. And more often than not, I've found that I was able to leave those conversations with either a new perspective or a tool that somebody else had tried a month before when they had gone through the same issue, or a contact of someone that could help. And I think what I'm realizing now, especially as an introvert and a very private person who doesn't shed all of my layers to anybody, I'm more convinced now than ever that if we want to be great leaders of social change, we need to actively cultivate, harness, and contribute to these types of communities.
Thanks for sharing that, Sabrina. And I did not know you were an introvert. I love it. I'm mindful of time. I do want to leave some space for some questions, but I'm going to steal maybe 5 more minutes or 3 more minutes for just the last couple of things that I wanted to cover. And I'd be remiss if, knowing the topic of this salon is around challenging the status quo. And you both exemplify that. And I feel like even in this conversation, you've shared examples of where you've done that actively through your work. But to dig in a little bit more, can you both share a moment in time where you've had to push against the norms? Steph, I'll turn it to you.
Sure. So one of the little known facts about solar is, I mentioned briefly at the top, is that you need a good FICO credit score to get solar in this country, which kind of doesn't really make sense, especially when you know that FICO was invented in 1956 to be an objective measure of people's creditworthiness, but it's not actually that objective. So it doesn't measure whether you pay your cell phone bills or your utility bills or your rental bills. It measures whether you pay your mortgage. So someone could have a $500,000 mortgage and have a higher FICO score than someone who's paying their rental bill on time every month. Warren Buffett has a pretty mediocre FICO credit score, I've heard, from someone who knows his finances. So that gives you an understanding that FICO isn't actually as objective as it seems. And we live in this world where we have advanced in a lot of ways since 1956, and our data science and our qualification standards should advance too. And so we got a little tired of finding people who were so excited to get guaranteed savings on their electricity bill by signing up for community solar. And then, man, they missed the FICO cutoff of 700 because more than half the country doesn't have that credit score. And they couldn't get this guaranteed savings product. So we created our own score. that's based on people's utility repayment history. It's called the energy score. And we got data scientists at MIT and Stanford to create the algorithm, and it's backed by machine learning, which I frankly know nothing about, but buzzword dropped. And we found that it's actually more accurate at predicting who pays their utility bills than FICO credit scores. But also it's more inclusive of low to moderate income Americans that would be qualified for solar than using FICO credit scores. So it turns out you can be more accurate and do what's good for business, and you can be more inclusive of low to moderate income Americans. You don't need to choose one or the other. We live in a modern world where we can use data science to rewrite our histories, rewrite our destinies. So that's an example of one of my favorite quotes about the status quo. Is this journalist named Carl T. Rowan, and he said that we've never worshipped at the feet of the status quo, or this country has a history of debunking the status quo, because that's the only way we move forward. That's the only way we get progress, is we reject the status quo and we are intent on finding a better way. And so there's no roadmap for that, which is scary and risky, but that's the only way I think we push ourselves forward.
Thanks for sharing that example. I will use this additional buzzword, energy score. Nicely done. Sabrina, if you don't mind sharing as well.
I think challenging the status quo is something we hit up against every single day. It's part and parcel of being a social change maker, which is you're trying to create a world that doesn't exist yet, and you're trying to show what's possible given a current reality. And that is going to cause tension and issues. And the reason why these problems haven't been solved is because there is such an adherence to the status quo. And I think there's so many examples I can give, but the one that's top of mind, and at Acumen, we get vulnerable real quick. And so if you're getting vulnerable with a challenge that I'm facing right now and have for a while, is the idea of paying bribes. It is just the way things operate here. In order to get any type of admission into a community or to be able to do any type of good work, you need to grease the wheels. It's not called a bribe, it's called chai money, tea money, drawer money, facilitation fee, a daily allowance, token of appreciation. It's called a whole bunch of things, but at the end of the day, it's a transfer of money to someone with more power that gives you admission to be able to do the work that you're doing. And I refuse to pay these bribes. Transparency is one of our core values at Kidogo. We strive to set a good example for our kids. We don't tolerate corruption. And I've struggled with it. And I've talked to other entrepreneurs that I admire who have been doing this work for a lot longer in these communities, and have asked them how they've navigated this. And they said, there is no way. You just need to do this and focus on what's important. And yet I still think there's got to be a better way. And so, for example, we didn't pay a bribe to this one person that was going to sign the papers of our early childhood center registration. And so it took 3 years to register our centers instead of 1 week. 2 months ago, we didn't pay a bribe to the chief of one community, a $5 bribe, to distribute play packs to 20,000 children in the community, which is a way to help learning at home while schools are closed during COVID. And because of that, some of my staff were arrested, and we had to pay 10 times the amount to get them out of jail because I refused to pay that bribe. And so it is so tricky. Even within my team, we've got debates, and I think I've had a lot of criticism from my team members to say, you just don't understand. This is just how it works. It's always worked this way. You're a foreigner, you don't get it, just pay it, and let's concentrate on what's actually important to our mission. And I continue to hold strong, and maybe it is this hard-edged hope, maybe it's naivety, but I continue to believe that there's got to be a better way of doing things, because the more that we don't stand up for things like this, the more we perpetuate the cycle and are complacent to it being okay. And so we've tried other tactics. We've really tried to build bridges with chiefs, for example, and build relationships and have conversations to say, what's important to you? What's the work that we're doing? How does it align to your vision for your own community? And we've gotten a lot of progress in some communities, and in others, it's a lot tougher. And so it's a journey that we're continuously on to challenge the status quo. And it is exhausting, but necessary, because we need to be models of the world that we want to see.
You've kind of hit one of the things that I was going to talk about. You're just so amazing at this, just the fact that when we do, we can throw out the term challenge the status quo, and we often want to glorify it and celebrate it. And it's important to do that because we lift people up as role models through examples of what they do, but there is an accompanying sacrifice and loss. And I think you just hit on the loss and the sacrifice. I mean, 3 years, and Sabrina, you're not alone. And I think being a part of the Acumen community of fellows, you've seen this over and over. There's so many other fellows who've hit these similar roadblocks, whether it is bribery or corruption or otherwise. And then the time lost is just, sometimes it's so hard to quantify even. So thanks for sharing that, because I do think it's as important to share the sacrifice and loss that we experience for being and doing in this world that we want to actually exemplify and model for others. And it does require a heck of a lot of patience to answer and to respond in the same way over and over again, because you will keep hitting that roadblock as you go. I am mindful of time. I'm gonna actually turn this over to the group, if that's okay. We've got about 10, 12 minutes left, and would love to leave space for others to ask questions too, if that's okay with both of you. And Alex, will you come off mute? Will you help me out here?
So we have one question so far and lots of really lovely, flattering, warm comments of you both, Sabrina and Steph, and you too, Batool. Our first question here is actually for you, Batool. Can you speak to how Acumen Academy enables these two organizations, or more specifically, Sabrina and Steph? What is it that we do to support them in their role as leaders?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for that question. So Sabrina and Steph are both fellows, just extraordinary women overall. And they've both gone through the Acumen Fellowship program, which is essentially providing leadership development, and more importantly, community. So I think it's the access to the community and the cohort that's created as a result of the experience that is more invaluable even, I think, than the year spent as part of the Acumen Fellowship experience in the program itself. And then I'll add on that once you're a part of the Acumen community, you gain access in a variety of different ways to a number of different things. So it means access to network, it means access to resources and funding as well. Steph was talking about mobilizing funding during this COVID time period. Acumen put out an emergency relief facility during this time. We raised funding specifically to provide grant funding to Acumen fellows, and Solstice was a part of that. So there's certainly access to funding in there as well. And what we also try to do is provide access to different networks and opportunities. So we've also put fellows' names forward to speak at TED Women. Steph was a part of that, and I know that we've put other recommendations forward for different competitions. And prize funding as well. So it's a mix of things in addition to the actual training and support and access to Acumen's network. It's really around the community and the cohort itself. And I'll stop because I think Steph and Sabrina can probably share more what it's meant for them.
I can definitely confirm that I count Batool and Acumen amongst the women that helped save Solstice, that allowed us to get to this new scale. And also Batool spends her free time empowering women leadership just outside of Acumen. Like Batool was our very first advisor to Solstice at a time when no one wanted to return my calls. And we have very impressive people on our board now, but Batool has always been there from day one. And that's what the power of this community is.
And I can say that we wouldn't exist without Acumen, simply because we started through an Acumen course. I think before all of Acumen Academy was created, and we're paired with an Acumen partner. And it was in that 2-year period after stumbling on a child and unsure of what the next step was and hesitation that an Acumen partner said, "What's your problem? Like, what's your problem from taking that leap?" And I think we dragged our feet and we said, it's money. We don't have money to do this. And he wrote a check for $5,000 and said, "Hop on a plane, get there and get started." And if it hadn't been for that partner, Brad Rosenberg, we wouldn't exist today. So huge fans of Acumen.
And then it sounds like there are some folks in the audience who are entrepreneurs themselves, are connected to the entrepreneurial community. You spoke on this a bit at the beginning, Batool, but maybe you could just sort of underscore how it is that Acumen supports entrepreneurs, obviously both through Academy and then through our portfolio work. Could you say a couple words on that if someone's an entrepreneur and interested in gaining support from us in some way?
Sure. Acumen's core work and kind of where we started was investing both equity and debt into social businesses around the world. And we've invested about 130 million in more than 100 companies. And our presence is in East and West Africa, across India, Pakistan, Latin America, and also into the United States. And we focus on a variety of different sectors. In each region, it's a little bit different. You know, I know, Alex, you can probably share more on what the focus has been here in the United States, in case folks are interested more over here. But we have a strong investing presence. And I think what's been unique in Acumen's approach, impact investing has become a large field over the last 15 plus years. Our approach has been essentially understanding where are the unique funding gaps that are required. So we invest patient capital, meaning we take a longer term view to supporting the social businesses, and we put impact first. So we understand, you know, this is actually core to what Acumen exemplifies, but we understand that there are trade-offs, and it's really important to identify what are those trade-offs between financial and social returns, and how do you make informed decisions around those trade-offs when you invest, not with an eye towards this is right and this is wrong, or this is best for shareholders versus this is what's best for stakeholders, but rather what is the problem you're trying to solve? What are the best ways and means to approach it? And in any moment, different choices on either side can serve you best, and you have the ability to choose accordingly. So where our criteria is out there, I think it's available, but I think it's more importantly the values with which we try to make investments around the world, which is unique.
So I don't think there are any more questions. So I'm going to ask one selfishly of the three of you, knowing that we have this topic. Obviously, the focus here is visionary women and harnessing the power of women as leaders, especially from a philanthropic perspective, and supporting them and changing the world. I would be curious, who are your, visionary women role models? Who do you think of as a woman in this world who's leading change that really inspires and motivates you? For each of you, Steph, Sabrina, and Batool.
Two come to mind, and they're going to make me sound very basic because there are a lot of people's heroes. So one is Jacqueline Novogratz. She has obviously influenced Acumen, but she's also an investor in Solstice. And she was one of the powerful women that used her privilege and her platform to give us exposure in our early days. She put us up for speaking engagements and things like that. And she's just very generous with her time. Jacqueline's the kind of leader where she leads with positivity as opposed to a fiefdom of fear, which is, when I come from the world of national security and counterterrorism and government and business, like there's a lot of leaders that lead with fear, and she leads with love. And another person who is like that is Michelle Obama. So when I was working in the Obama administration, the Obamas really are as good people as they seem to be. And they really take very seriously the fact that they are role models, and they have a responsibility to be better people because they're role models, and because children are watching them all the time. And to have leaders that know that and act as such is pretty incredible.
For me, it's hands down, it's my mom. She is my role model. My mom is a cancer warrior. She battled 3 advanced cancers within a 5-year period and has lived to tell the story. Literally, she actually wrote a book about it earlier this year called Choosing Hope, 1 Woman, 3 Cancers. And it's been absolutely incredible to watch her face this with so much courage and humility and hope. And I know we talked about hope earlier, but for me, watching her choose hope in spite of having cancer and an incurable cancer, and knowing the reality of her situation, that there is no cure, that her life trajectory may be shortened, and yet to still approach each day with curiosity and love and wanting to learn something new. And the resilience and the grit that I've seen in my mom through her loss of identity, not being able to work, losing her hair, her body changing, her independence changing, and yet wake up every day with a resolve to live. I don't know of anyone more inspiring than that, and I'm so lucky to be her daughter.
Thanks, Sabrina. And I'm going to give a general shout out in truth, because almost every single one of the Acumen Fellows across India, Pakistan, East Africa, and globally is why I am at Acumen and why I do this work, because you are serving the communities, putting your money where your mouth is, and there's nothing more inspiring than that. And you're showing real examples of hope. So my hat is off to all of you and to the broader Fellows community world over. In the last couple of minutes, I did want to wrap this up. I know we've got hard stops, everybody does in this new Zoom world. Thanks, Alex, for helping. I really appreciate it. And again, a huge thank you to Visionary Women. Please do visit the website if you haven't, visionarywomen.org. If you want to learn more about Acumen, it's acumen.org, and Acumen Academy. Any of our free courses you are welcome to take a look at. It's acumenacademy.org. And if you'd like to learn more about Steph's work with Solstice in the United States, please feel free to send an email. Maybe Steph, you can drop your email in the chat, and same for Sabrina. They're both doing incredible work, and there's always a welcome of kind of love, encouragement, and support. So if there's anything that you'd like to lend yourselves to, please do feel free to reach out to us. We'd really appreciate it. And with that, I think we are right on time. Aren't you so proud? I'm proud of us for wrapping on time. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. And I think that's a wrap.
I think that's a wrap. Batool, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, girls, women. You are amazing and inspiring, and we're so happy to be partnered with Acumen. And we'll continue this series and keep highlighting the impact that we can all each individually have. And thank you for helping us to know that we can do more.
Take care.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you so
Thank
much,
you.
Nina. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to
Bye.
everybody for coming on. We'll see you soon.